Hey, what's up? I'm Andrew with Field Treasure Designs. So there's probably like 1,000 how to make cornhole boards videos all over the internet, but I just made these for our own fun and enjoyment, and I'd love to show you how I made them, so check this out. So first I laid out my 1/2-inch plywood sacrificial strips that help me raise up the workpiece whenever I'm cutting it so that I don't damage my workbench. Then I grabbed my 4x8 sheet of 1/2-inch sanded plywood. I actually had this left over from an earlier project, and honestly, it works perfect. The good news is since it's 4 feet wide, all you have to do is measure 2 feet and then make one cut. So here I just measure 2 feet and then set up my rip cut to make the cut. And as usual, the Craig rip cut always does a great job when I need to make quick and similar cuts all the same length. The key is going slow and making sure that the saw is parallel to the guide on the left. So a lot of cornhole board plans call for 2x4s as the main structure for the box, but I went with 1x4s. I thought it would work better because it would make them lighter and easier to move around. I bought 3 at 12-foot lengths. The cuts are relatively easy to make. You do 2 at 4 feet long, then you do 2 at 21 inches wide, then you just make the legs at 12.5 inches long. Obviously, you double this to make a full set of 2 cornhole boards. And don't worry, you don't have to remember this. I'll have the details below the video as well as on my blog just to help you out. I grabbed my Craig K5 pocket hole jig to make the pocket holes in each of the box boards. I wanted to use that to secure them together. So after I did the ends of the box boards, I wanted to do the sides because this is the way I was going to secure the box to the top plate of plywood. I wanted to grab it from underneath and not from the top down, as you'll see here in a minute. To assemble the box, I just used wood glue, and then I grabbed one of my Craig clamps to hold it together, and then grabbed 2 pocket hole screws to secure it together while that glue dried. Repeated the process and got the boxes done. This is what I was talking about earlier, that I'm going to secure the box frame to the top plate with wood glue. So I did a quick bead and then I spread it out with my silicone brush. This is what's going to hold it together, but those pocket hole screws are just going to fasten it together while it dries. This is way better than using nails or screws from the top down, and as you'll see later, you're not going to see anything once the cornhole boards are finished. Laid it down and squared it all up, and then little by little just went around and secured the box to the top plate with pocket hole screws. So now both boxes are done and there's no screw heads or nail heads sticking out the top. Isn't that nice and clean? Now to make the legs. So I measure 1 inch from the end, and then I measure halfway between to find the middle. Then I grabbed a stain can, as you can see, to make my radius. The radius is important so that these legs, as they pivot out, they don't catch on the box frame. In order to cut the radius out, I grabbed my Bosch handheld jigsaw, and as you can see, my new Polk workbench comes in real handy. I used micro jig clamps in my bench dog holes to hold the workpiece steady. Isn't that so nice? So yeah, I just followed the line and cut my radius of all 4 of the legs. After I cut all the radiuses, I grabbed my random orbital sander and sanded all the edges smooth. Since I had already marked the holes in the center of the legs, all I had to do was take them over to my drill press and use a 1/4 inch drill bit and make the holes. I flipped over the boxes and I grabbed my spacers, made sure they measured 1 inch, and then used that as a guide to set the legs 1 inch from the box edge to then drill them in and secure them. This setup is pretty straightforward. I used 2-inch 1/4 diameter hex bolts with a washer on each side, and then I got a lock nut. The reason I use the lock nut is because those have tension on them and they won't come loose on their own. Now it's time to tighten it. I like to tighten it to where it's snug and where it takes a little bit of effort to move the leg, but it's not swinging freely. I use a Tecton socket set that I love. I'll have a link to it as well as my other tools below. Here's the process of attaching the legs from a different angle, just in case it helps. Next, it was time to make the center holes. I was a little nervous, I can't lie. So you measure halfway, of course, and then the actual measurements dictate that the center is 9 inches from the top. Here, I'm using this awesome circle making tool that I'll have a link to in the bottom, but essentially I measured 3 inches, which is half the diameter of 6 inches, which is what the hole should be. I put the pin in the middle and then draw the circle. I then do a quick check to make sure I'm 6 inches solid, and yes, good to go. Next, I need to drill a pilot hole to get my jigsaw blade in. You're gonna wanna use a fine-tooth jigsaw blade so that you're not ripping shards of the plywood around. You want this hole to be nice and clean. I started out by using my Bosch Palm Jigsaw 12-volt system, but unfortunately, it would not hold up, so I had to transition into my powered 120-volt DeWalt Beast, and it did an amazing job. Here's the other hole just to give you the full effect of how I did it. Man, I gotta tell you, with a nice blade and a high-powered jigsaw, you can make a really nice circle as long as you go slow and follow the line. And yes, the moment we've all been waiting for, sanding it all down. You knew it was inevitable that I'd have to bust out my orbital sander. And yeah, I did 220 grit basically across the entire thing. I sanded the tops, the sides, the insides, pretty much everywhere. Since cornhole boards are picked up and stored and carried and thrown in the car, I wanted every surface to be smooth. The next step was to make the angled cuts on the legs so that the cornhole boards sit at an angle. You measure 12 inches up and then mark your line with a straight edge. I use my straight edge resting on the front of the cornhole board and then dropping it to that 12-inch line. Then I took each leg to the miter saw, and I know it's hard to see with my light on it, but I essentially matched the angle real carefully, and then once it was ready, I made the cut. And yeah, look at that, a nice solid angle. Flip it over for a nice test run, and sweet. Nobody wants to get a splinter while reaching into the hole to grab your beanbag, so gotta sand that up nice and smooth. Okay, so when it comes to the design on top, the sky is the limit. I wanted just kind of a classic look with color, so I found the triangle version to be really cool. I found the center point, grabbed my straight edge, drew the lines, and then I got some nice quality painter's tape to stretch out as the barrier before I went to paint it. Slow and steady is key here to make sure that tape is straight and secure to the wood. And now to paint it up, I just used a 1-inch foam brush with some Valspar sample paint from Lowe's. This color is called Tropical Bay. It was actually one of our most popular colors when we used to make the Reclaim palette clocks. If any of you have that clock, give me a shout below, that would be awesome. And of course I've got to brand it with the Field Treasure Designs logo. Can we just be honest for a second? There are very few things more satisfying than this moment of removing the tape, right? So funny story, I had the blue Tropical Bay color done, the cornhole boards looked great, but then I had this thought, oh my goodness, I should totally do my favorite baseball team, the Houston Astros colors. So I ran to Home Depot, I got samples of the orange and navy that are the Houston Astros colors, and I went ahead and retaped it and repainted all of it over again. It was a ton of extra work. I actually had to do like 10 extra coats of each just to cover it, but all in all, I'm glad I did it. So finally, after all of that painting, it was time to do the polyurethane. I like using a Minwax polyurethane finish. I think for outdoors and bean bags, it's just a really good protective sealant. And there they are, the Houston Astros color-themed DIY cornhole boards. Man, this was such an easy project, and I am so glad that I took the time to make them because I love playing cornhole. And if you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay connected for all my future videos. Thanks so much. See ya.